The night was cold, and the ruins of the old colony lay silent. Broken walls stood like dark shadows, and the wind carried the smell of ashes. Among the ruins walked a mother, her skin marked with the strange colors of her alien kind. Beside her walked her daughter, a small girl with tired eyes and an empty stomach. The little girl clutched her mother's hand, but her steps were weak. Every few steps, she stumbled. And her mother pulled her close, whispering softly, "Just a little more. We will find food soon." But the mother knew she was lying. For days, they had eaten nothing. For weeks they had hidden from the soldiers who patrolled the area. Humans, they called them. Some aliens feared them, others hated them. But everyone respected their strength. And tonight, as the moon shone pale over the ruins, the mother saw one of those humans standing near a supply crate. He was tall, wearing heavy armor. His weapon resting at his side, the light of the small fire near him glowed against his pale human face. His eyes scanned the shadows, sharp and watchful. The mother froze, pulling her daughter back, but the little girl cried out, her stomach growling loudly. The soldier turned, and for a moment his hand moved to his weapon. The mother's heart raced. Should she run? Should she hide? But there was no food, no shelter, and her daughter's weak body could not last another night. She stepped forward slowly, trembling with fear. The human's eyes narrowed as he watched her approach. The little girl hid behind her mother's legs peeking out at the tall figure. The mother raised her hands, showing she carried no weapon. Her voice shook as she spoke, broken words of human language. "Please, food." "My daughter." The soldier did not answer at first. He stared at her, his face unreadable. The fire cracked between them, and the silence pressed heavily on her heart. Desperation filled her mind. She thought of the offers she had heard others make in the ruins. Some aliens gave away their honor, their bodies, their pride, for one meal. For one drink of clean water. She looked at her daughter's thin arms, her small eyes that had lost their shine. The mother swallowed her fear, and whispered the words that burned her soul, "Just one night with me. Feed my daughter." The words cut the silence like a blade. The soldier stiffened, his hand tightening on his weapon. The mother lowered her head, shame burning inside her. Her daughter looked up at her, not understanding the human's breath was steady, but his eyes flashed with something she could not read: anger, pity, or maybe disgust. The mother braced herself for rejection, maybe even death. She had given everything in those words, everything she had left. The silence stretched, the fire cracked. The night seemed endless. Then the soldier spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "No," he said, shaking his head slowly. The mother's heart sank. She had gambled her dignity, and lost. Her daughter whimpered. Clutching tighter to her leg, the human stepped closer, his boots crunching on broken stone. The mother closed her eyes, ready for pain. But instead, she heard words she never expected. "I don't want that," the soldier said firmly. His voice softened. "But I can give you something else." The mother lifted her head in shock. His eyes were not cold, but filled with something unfamiliar. Not cruelty, not desire, but pity. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration bar. Breaking it in half, he knelt down slowly. Lowering it to the little girl, the child's eyes widened. She looked to her mother, then back to the human. Her hunger was stronger than her fear. She took the food with small trembling hands and ate quickly. Tears running down her cheeks, the mother's heart twisted. What kind of man was this? Why refuse her desperate bargain? Why give food without asking for payment? The soldier stood again, his armor shining in the firelight. He looked down at the mother. "You don't need to bargain like that," Press said, his voice low but steady. "You need more than food for one night." The mother stared, confused, her breath shallow. The soldier pointed behind him to the campfire and the small shelter beside it. "There is space," he said. "You and the girl. Stay there tonight." The mother's chest tightened. She could not believe what she was hearing. No one gave shelter for free. No one gave food without demand. Her daughter smiled faintly, her mouth full, her tiny body warming in the firelight. The soldier turned his back and returned to the fire, leaving them with the choice to trust or to run. The mother looked at her daughter, then at the fire. Her heart was heavy with fear, but also touched with something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The firelight flickered as the soldier turned his face away. The mother stood frozen, her daughter's small hand gripping her dress. Her heart pounded with fear. She could not understand this man. Why would a human, armed and powerful, refuse what she offered? Why would he say no when others in the ruins had taken without even asking? The little girl finished the ration bar, crumbs clinging to her lips. She looked up at the soldier with wide eyes. In those eyes was not fear anymore, but a strange glow of trust. The mother pulled her close, whispering, "Stay behind me." Her voice trembled. She could not let her guard down. Not now, not with. A human so close, the soldier turned slowly, his armor glinting in the dim light. He studied the mother, his eyes sharp but not cruel. "You don't understand," he said firmly. "I don't want what you offered." The words hit her harder than rejection. They confused her, shook her. She had been ready to give away her last shred of dignity for a single meal, and he had thrown it aside as if it was nothing. Her breath caught in her throat, she thought. It was some kind of trick. Humans were known for bargains, for deals with hidden costs. Maybe he was mocking her. Maybe he would take her daughter instead. The thought made her knees weak. But she clenched her fists. She would fight if it came to that. She would die before letting her child be taken. But the soldier did not move closer. He did not smile with cruelty. Instead, he pulled another ration from his pack and tossed it gently onto the broken stones near her feet. "Eat," he said simply. His voice was heavy but calm. The mother stared at the packet as if it were poisoned. Her daughter reached for it, but she held the child back. Suspicion clouded her mind. Why would he give more? Why would he share? What was the price? The soldier sighed, his gaze drifting to the sky. The stars shone above. Silent witnesses of a ruined world. "You think I want something in return?" he said quietly. His voice was softer now, almost tired. "I don't." The mother's lips parted. Confusion spreading like fire in her chest. Her whole life had been survival through trade, through bargains, through loss. Nothing was ever free. Yet here stood a man who offered without asking. The little girl tugged at her mother's arm. "Please," she whispered. "I am still hungry." The mother's eyes burned with tears. Slowly, with shaking hands, she opened the ration pack and gave it to her child. The girl ate quickly. But this time she smiled, a small, fragile smile that broke the mother's heart. She looked at the human again. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why?" The soldier's eyes met hers. For a long time he said nothing. Only the crack of fire and the distant howl of wind filled the night. Then, at last he spoke, his voice low. "Because I have seen too much suffering." His hand tightened into a fist, the metal of his armor creaking. "I have seen men take and take until nothing is left." His eyes hardened. "I won't be like them." The mother's breath caught. She had never heard a human speak like this. Most humans she had seen were hard, ruthless, or cold, but this one, he carried a different weight. Not hunger for power, but guilt. She could feel it in his words, in the way his eyes turned away from her. There were ghosts in his past, ghosts that made him different from the others. Still, her fear did not leave. She stepped closer, clutching her daughter. "If not food for one night," she asked softly, "Then what do you want from me?" Her words trembled, not with shame this time, but with suspicion. The human soldier shook his head. "I don't want you to give me anything," he said. "You and your daughter need more than food." He gestured to the small tent behind the fire. "You need safety." The mother's eyes widened. Safety, the word felt strange, almost foreign. She had not known safety since the war began. Every night was fear, every morning hunger. But now this human offered her something she did not believe existed anymore. Her daughter tugged at her arm again, whispering, "Can we stay, Mother?" The mother's heart twisted. She wanted to believe. She wanted to let her daughter sleep without fear for one night, but trust was dangerous. Hope was dangerous. She looked at the soldier again, searching his face for lies, but his eyes held. No hunger, no greed, only a heavy sadness. The sadness of a man who had lost too much. The night grew colder. The fire burned lower. The soldier sat near the flames, his back straight. His weapon resting across his lap. He did not look at them again. He simply waited, silent, patient. The mother held her daughter close, her mind torn. Every instinct screamed to run. But her daughter's warm body in her arms reminded her of the truth. They had nowhere left to go, and so she stood there, staring at the fire. Caught between fear and hope, between the ruins of her past and the fragile promise of tomorrow. The soldier's words echoed in her mind. "I don't want that. I can give you something else." The night had not ended her suffering, but it had given her a choice, and choices were rare in times of despair. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Just one night." The fire burned low, crackling softly. The soldier sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the flames. The mother stood a few paces away, her daughter pressed against her side. The warmth of the rations still lingered in their bellies, but the cold night pressed hard against their skin. The wind carried whispers through the broken colony walls, and every shadow looked like danger. The soldier's words echoed in her mind. "You don't need to bargain like that. You need more than food for one night." She did not understand him. Humans were not known for kindness, not in her world, not in her life. And yet, here he was, offering something she had not dared to dream about. Safety. Still, she feared his true intentions. Nothing in this broken world was ever free. Her daughter tugged at her arm, whispering, "Mother, I am tired." The small voice pierced her heart. The girl had walked miles on weak legs, had gone hungry for days, and now she was asking for only one thing: rest. The mother looked at the soldier, her lips trembling. She took a slow step forward. "What do you want in return?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Her question was not about food now, but about the price of his shelter. The soldier lifted his eyes from the fire, meeting her gaze. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a weight too heavy for words. "I don't want anything," he said. "I only want to know that when you leave this fire, you and your daughter are alive." His words struck her like a blade and yet soothed her like a balm. For a long moment, she stood frozen, unsure whether to trust them. Then he did something that startled her even more. He stood and removed his helmet, placing it on the ground beside the fire. His face was pale, tired, lined with scars. But his eyes were human in a way she had never seen. Not cruel, not greedy, but weary. A man who had seen too much loss. The mother blinked, her fear warring with her curiosity. "Why help us?" she whispered. "You are human. We are not. We are enemies." The soldier shook his head slowly. "I've seen enough war to know who the real enemy is." He replied, "It's not your child. It's not you." He looked down at the little girl, who stared back at him with wide, innocent eyes. She deserves a chance to grow, not to starve in the ashes of war. The mother felt her chest tighten. No one had spoken of her daughter like that. No one had looked at her child and seen more than a burden. Her lips trembled as she asked again, "Then why risk yourself? If your commander finds out you helped us, what will happen to you?" The soldier's jaw tightened. He looked back at the flames, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Punishment," he admitted. "Maybe worse." He paused, his voice low and steady. "But if I do nothing, if I walk away, then I carry your deaths with me forever." His hand clenched against his knee. "And I already carry too many ghosts." The mother's breath caught. She could hear the truth in his words. This man was haunted, not only by the war, but by the choices he had made. And now, standing here, he was choosing differently, not for himself, but for them. Her daughter stepped forward suddenly, small hands clutching the hem of the soldier's armor. "Thank you," the girl whispered, her voice soft but clear. The soldier blinked, startled. He looked down at the tiny alien child holding onto him without fear, for the first time in many years. His lips curved into the smallest of smiles. It was brief, fragile, but real. The mother's heart raced. This was not what she had expected. She had offered her dignity for one night of food. But the man had returned something far greater. Not hunger satisfied, not lust fulfilled, but a new bargain. A bargain of trust, of shelter, of humanity shared, across two different kinds of people. The soldier gestured toward the small shelter beside the fire. "Go inside," he said softly. "There are blankets. The ground is warmer there." The mother hesitated, her hand gripping her daughter's shoulder. It could still be a trap. But her child's body leaned forward eagerly, her eyes shining with hope. The mother closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to stars she no longer believed in. Then she nodded and led her daughter inside the shelter. The soldier remained outside, seated near the fire, his weapon across his knees. He did not follow them, did not press for anything more. He simply kept watch. The mother lay beside her daughter on the blanket, her mind filled with questions, with doubts. But when she looked at her child's small face, peaceful for the first time in months, she felt something stir inside her. Not fear, not shame, but a fragile seed of hope as the night dragged on. The soldier kept his eyes on the shadows. Every sound made his hand tighten on his weapon. But his heart felt lighter than it had in years, because for once, he was not killing to protect. For once, he was protecting without killing. The mother drifted to sleep at last, though unease lingered in her chest. This was no ordinary night. It was the beginning of something else, a new kind of bargain, not of flesh, not of desperation, but of trust. And trust, in a world torn apart by war, was more valuable than gold. The small shelter smelled of smoke and metal. Its walls were thin, patched together from scraps of fabric and steel, but to the mother and her daughter, it felt like a palace compared to the cold streets of the ruined colony. The blanket beneath them was rough, yet warmer than the frozen stone they had slept on for weeks. The little girl curled up instantly, her body finally safe enough to rest. Her eyes closed, her breathing soft and steady. The mother sat upright beside her, arms wrapped around her knees, unable to close her eyes. Through the torn flap of the shelter, she saw the soldier still sitting by the fire. His weapon lay across his knees, his face turned toward the darkness beyond the camp. He kept watch like a sentinel, unmoving, silent, but the mother could not let go of her fear. She whispered to herself, "Why? Why does he help us?" Her voice cracked with doubt. She wanted to believe this man was different. Yet every story she had heard of humans said the same thing. They take, they destroy, they never give. Hours passed. The wind howled outside, carrying with it the smell of dust and old blood. Every creak, every whisper of night made the mother's heart jump. She stayed awake, clutching her daughter close, her eyes darting to the soldier's shadow by the fire. When dawn's pale light began to break, She finally allowed her body to rest. Her eyes closed for only a moment, but that moment was enough. She woke to voices, low, sharp voices just outside the shelter. Her heart leaped into her throat. She pressed her daughter against her chest, pulling the blanket around them. The flap of the shelter opened, and sunlight streamed inside. 3 human soldiers stood there, their armor heavy, their faces hard. One of them sneered as his gaze fell on her. "What is this?" he barked. "Why are they here?" The mother's body froze. She could not run, she could not fight. Her daughter whimpered softly. Burying her face in her chest, the soldier who had given them food rose from his place by the fire. He stepped between the other men and the shelter. His eyes sharp. "They stay," he said firmly. The tallest soldier narrowed his eyes. "Orders don't say anything about sheltering aliens." He spat. "They're dangerous. They don't belong here." The mother's chest tightened. She had known this would happen. Kindness was fragile, and cruelty always waited nearby. She braced herself to be dragged out, to be beaten or worse, but the soldier who had helped her did not move aside. "They're no threat," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "They stay." The other soldiers exchanged looks, anger flashing in their eyes. "Why protect them?" one demanded. "Did she pay you?" another sneered. The mother's face burned with shame, her hands tightening around her daughter. But the soldier's voice cut through the air like a blade. "No," he said sharply. "They are under my protection." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the camp. The other soldiers muttered curses under their breath, but none of them dared to challenge further. At last, they turned and walked away, their armor clanking with each step. The mother's breath shuddered out of her. She had been seconds away from losing everything again, but once more, the human had stood between her and the world's cruelty. He turned back to her, his face calm, though his hands trembled slightly. "You're safe," he said, his voice steady. But his eyes revealed the cost of his defiance. He had made enemies among his own kind, and in this world, enemies could be as deadly as hunger. The mother lowered her gaze, her voice breaking. "Why? Why risk yourself for us?" He said nothing for a while, only kneeling to adjust the fire. Then, at last, he spoke quietly. "Because no one risked themselves for me when I needed it." The words carried a sorrow deeper than she could grasp. She wanted to ask, but fear kept her silent. The day dragged on. The mother tried to rest, but her body stayed tense. She watched the soldier bring more food, water, and even a small toy he had carved from wood. Her daughter laughed for the first time in months, holding the toy close. The sound made the mother's eyes sting with tears, but still her mind whispered warnings. This cannot last. Kindness always ends. When night fell again, the camp grew. Quiet, the soldier sat by the fire as before, his weapon across his knees. The mother lay beside her daughter, eyes open, fear wrapped around her like a second skin. Even as warmth filled her belly and her child slept peacefully, she could not believe in safety. Not yet. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Was this man truly different, or would his kindness turn to cruelty tomorrow? And yet, as she listened to the soldier's steady breathing by the fire, as she felt the soft weight of her daughter sleeping soundly in her arms, a whisper stirred in her chest. Not fear this time, but something she had long forgotten. Hope. The days slowly turned into weeks. The ruins of the colony were still broken, the air still heavy with dust and smoke, but inside the small shelter near the soldier's fire, something began to change. The little girl no longer cried herself to sleep. Her cheeks were no longer hollow, her steps no longer weak. Each morning she woke to the smell of warm food the soldier shared. Each night she fell asleep under blankets that carried the faint scent of fire and safety. Her laughter began to return, a sound so small and fragile, yet powerful enough to chase away shadows. The mother watched with wary eyes. Her daughter laughed at the soldier's clumsy attempts to speak her language. She clapped her hands when he carved small toys from scraps of wood. She smiled when he drew simple shapes in the dirt, teaching her human words. "Stone," he said, pointing to the ground. "Sky," he said, pointing upward. The girl repeated softly, her voice trembling but eager. And the soldier nodded, patient, never raising his voice, never showing anger. The mother, however, did not laugh. She kept her distance, her heart heavy with suspicion. She had seen kindness turn to cruelty before. She had seen men feed the hungry only to demand repayment later. And so, while her daughter grew closer to the soldier each day, the mother held back. Her eyes studied him carefully, searching for signs of deceit, but each time she found only the same look in his eyes, tired, sad, but gentle. One evening, the soldier returned later than usual. His armor dented, his face streaked with dirt and blood. The little girl gasped and ran to him. Her small hands touched his arm. Her voice trembling. "You hurt," she said in broken human words. The soldier gave a faint smile, shaking his head. "It's nothing," he whispered, sitting down heavily by the fire, but the mother saw the wound hidden under his armor. Without thinking, she hurried to his side, pulling at the straps of his gear. "Fool," she muttered under her breath. "You bleed." He tried to wave her off, but she ignored him. Her hands moved quickly, tearing strips of cloth to wrap the wound. The soldier winced, but did not push her away. For the first time, the mother touched him without fear. And in that moment, she saw him not as a soldier, not as a human, but as a man who bled, who suffered, who risked his life, not for her body, not for her silence, but for her and her child's survival. The little girl sat close, clutching the wooden toy he had carved for her, her eyes filled with worry. When the bandage was tied, she leaned against the soldier's arm and whispered, "Thank you. Stay." The soldier's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I will," he said softly, his voice cracking with exhaustion. The mother looked at him, and for the first time, her suspicion faltered. This man was different, truly different. As days passed, the soldier did more than feed them. He gathered scrap metal and wood, slowly piecing together a stronger shelter. At first, the mother thought it was only temporary, but he kept working, each night repairing, each morning adding more. Her daughter began to help, carrying small stones, laughing when he praised her efforts. The ruins of their world had taken everything from them, but now, brick by brick, something was being rebuilt. Other soldiers still looked with suspicion. Some whispered cruel things, others stared with anger. The mother saw it, and her fear grew. She knew this man was risking his place, his safety, even his life, but he never wavered. When questioned, his answer was always the same. "They are under my protection." At night, when the camp grew quiet, the mother lay awake, listening to the soft breathing of her daughter and the steady presence of the soldier by the fire. Her mind whispered doubt, but her heart whispered something else, something she had not felt in years: gratitude. One evening, as the stars stretched across the dark sky, the little girl sat beside the soldier, her small hands clutching the toy horse he had carved. "Why?" she asked suddenly, her eyes wide. "Why you help us?" The soldier looked at her, his face unreadable for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low, heavy with truth. "Because once someone should have helped me, but they didn't." His eyes drifted to the flames, shadows dancing across his scarred face. "And I swore, if I ever had the chance, I would not make the same mistake." The girl tilted her head, not fully understanding. But she smiled and leaned against him, her trust unshaken. The mother heard his words, and something inside her broke. The walls she had built around her heart, the armor of suspicion and fear, it began to crack. She realized this man was not Offering them survival for one night, he was offering them something she thought was lost forever, a home. And as she watched her daughter drift to sleep under the soldier's watchful eyes, the mother whispered silently to herself, maybe humans are not all monsters. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. The days had grown calmer, almost peaceful. The little girl laughed often now. Chasing shadows in the camp with her wooden toy, the mother no longer counted each breath as her last. For the first time in months, she believed they might survive. But peace in a broken world is fragile, and it never lasts for long. One night, the air carried a new kind of silence. The fire crackled softly. The soldier sat with his weapon across his knees. The mother rested inside the shelter, her daughter curled against her chest. Then she heard its footsteps, not the heavy, steady sound of armored men, but quick, desperate steps scraping against broken stone. The soldier's head lifted, his eyes narrowing into the darkness. Figures emerged from the ruins. Thin and hollow-eyed, other aliens, survivors of the war. There were 4 of them, their clothes ragged, their faces twisted with hunger. In their hands they carried makeshift weapons, rusted blades, broken pipes, sharpened scrap. The soldier rose to his feet, his body tense. The mother pulled her daughter close, peeking through the flap of the shelter. Her heart pounded. She knew these men. Not their faces, but their kind, desperate, starving. Willing to trade blood for bread, one of them stepped forward. His voice rough. "Give us the food, human," he growled, "or we take it." The soldier's voice was calm but firm. "There's enough here for everyone." But not like this. The alien sneered, his hollow eyes flashing. "Spare us your human lies," he spat. "We've seen you feed them." His gaze flicked to the shelter. The woman and her brat. The mother's breath caught. Her daughter whimpered against her chest. The soldier's stance tightened. "They are under my protection," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "Walk away before you do something you regret." The 4 intruders laughed bitterly. One raised his blade and hissed, "We already regret everything," and then they rushed forward. The clash was sudden and brutal. The soldier moved with precision, his weapon striking against their crude blades. The firelight flashed against steel, sparks flying as metal met metal. The mother held her daughter close, her body trembling as screams and shouts filled the air. The first intruder fell, his weapon knocked from his hand. The soldier shoved him aside and turned to block another strike. But they kept coming, fueled not by skill, but by desperation. The soldier grunted as a blade scraped across his armor, leaving a shallow cut. The mother wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her legs would not move. Her child's tiny fingers clung to her dress, holding her in place. At last, the soldier drove the last attacker to the ground. His weapon pressed to the man's chest. The others lay groaning nearby, disarmed but alive. The soldier's chest heaved with breath, sweat dripping down his face. He stared at the beaten men, his voice low but steady. "Go," he said, "go, and never come back." The intruders scrambled to their feet, dragging one another into the darkness. Their curses faded into the night, swallowed by the ruins. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soldier's heavy breathing. The mother stepped out slowly, her daughter still clutched to her chest. Her eyes widened as she saw the blood seeping from a cut on the soldier's arm. You protected us," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I told you," he said quietly. "You are under my protection." Her heart twisted. She had doubted him, feared him, questioned him. But tonight he had risked his life not only against strangers, but against his own hunger and exhaustion. He had stood between them and death. When he could have easily turned away, The little girl slipped from her mother's arms and ran to him. Her tiny hands reached for his. "You hurt again," she said softly. Her eyes wide with concern, the soldier crouched down, wincing at the pain in his arm, but he gave her a faint smile. "I'll be all right," he murmured. Her small fingers brushed his scarred hand. And in that touch was something stronger than words trust. The mother felt her eyes sting with tears. She had spent so long preparing herself for betrayal, but every time she expected cruelty, this man gave her something else. Kindness. Later that night, as the soldier sat by the fire once more, his arm bandaged, the mother sat across from him. Her daughter asleep between them, for the first time, she did not sit with suspicion in her heart for the first time. She looked at him not as a human soldier, but as a man. A man who chose to protect instead of destroy. A man who chose to build instead of take. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Why risk so much?" For us, the soldier stared into the flames, his eyes distant. "Because, if I don't, then what am I fighting for?" he said. His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. The mother felt them settle deep within her chest. For the first time in a long time, she believed, not just in survival, but in the possibility of something more. The night was still dangerous, the world still broken, but in the glow of that small fire, a fragile bond had been forged, one that even the shadows of war could not easily break. The days had grown calmer, almost peaceful. The little girl laughed often now, chasing shadows in the camp with her wooden toy. The mother no longer counted each breath as her last. For the first time in months, she believed they might survive. But peace in a broken world is fragile, and it never lasts for long. One night, the air carried a new kind of silence. The fire crackled softly. The soldier sat with his weapon across his knees. The mother rested inside the shelter, her daughter curled against her chest. Then she heard its footsteps, not the heavy, steady sound of armored men, but quick, desperate steps scraping against broken stone. The soldier's head lifted, his eyes narrowing into the darkness. Figures emerged from the ruins. Thin and hollow-eyed, other aliens, survivors of the war. There were 4 of them, their clothes ragged, their faces twisted with hunger. In their hands, they carried makeshift weapons, rusted blades, broken pipes, sharpened scrap. The soldier rose to his feet, his body tense. The mother pulled her daughter close, peeking through the flap of the shelter. Her heart pounded. She knew these men. Not their faces, but their kind, desperate, starving. Willing to trade blood for bread, one of them stepped forward. His voice rough. "Give us the food, human," he growled, "or we take it." The soldier's voice was calm but firm. "There's enough here for everyone." "But not like this," the alien sneered, his hollow eyes flashing. "Spare us your human lies," he spat. "We've seen you feed them." His gaze flicked to the shelter. The woman and her brat. The mother's breath caught. Her daughter whimpered against her chest. The soldier's stance tightened. "They are under my protection," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "Walk away before you do something you regret." The 4 intruders laughed bitterly. One raised his blade and hissed, "We already regret everything." And then they rushed forward. The clash was sudden and brutal. The soldier moved with precision, his weapon striking against their crude blades. The firelight flashed against steel, sparks flying as metal met metal. The mother held her daughter close, her body trembling as screams and shouts filled the air. The first intruder fell, his weapon knocked from his hand. The soldier shoved him aside and turned to block another strike. But they kept coming, fueled not by skill but by desperation. The soldier grunted as a blade scraped across his armor, leaving a shallow cut. The mother wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her legs would not move. Her child's tiny fingers clung to her dress, holding her in place. At last, the soldier drove the last attacker to the ground. His weapon pressed to the man's chest. The others lay groaning nearby, disarmed but alive. The soldier's chest heaved with breath, sweat dripping down his face. He stared at the beaten men. His voice low but steady. "Go," he said. "Go, and never come back." The intruders scrambled to their feet. Dragging one another into the darkness, their curses faded into the night, swallowed by the ruins. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soldier's heavy breathing. The mother stepped out slowly, her daughter still clutched to her chest. Her eyes widened as she saw the blood seeping from a cut on the soldier's arm. You protected us," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I told you," he said quietly. "You are under my protection." Her heart twisted. She had doubted him, feared him, questioned him. But tonight he had risked his life not only against strangers, but against his own hunger and exhaustion. He had stood between them and death. When he could have easily turned away, the little girl slipped from her mother's arms and ran to him. Her tiny hands reached for his. "You hurt again," she said softly. Her eyes wide with concern, the soldier crouched down, wincing at the pain in his arm. But he gave her a faint smile. "I'll be all right," he murmured. Her small fingers brushed his scarred hand. And in that touch was something stronger than words trust. The mother felt her eyes sting with tears. She had spent so long preparing herself for betrayal, but every time she expected cruelty, this man gave her something else, kindness, later that night. As the soldier sat by the fire once more, his arm bandaged, the mother sat across from him, her daughter asleep between them. For the first time, she did not sit with suspicion in her heart for the first time. She looked at him not as a human soldier, but as a man who chose to protect instead of destroy, a man who chose to build instead of take. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Why risk so much?" For us, the soldier stared into the flames, his eyes distant. "Because if I don't, then what am I fighting for?" he said. His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. The mother felt them settle deep within her chest. For the first time in a long time, she believed, not just in survival, but in the possibility of something more. The night was still dangerous, the world still broken, but in the glow of that small fire, a fragile bond had been forged, one that even the shadows of war could not easily break.